Good day. Today we'll be looking at Prelim Practice Paper 3, Booklet A. For the first question, straight off the top, I see words, the reproductive systems, plant and human. So for the reproductive system, it is important that we're able to identify the various parts of the reproductive system of the plant and humans, at the same time know their functions. So the question asked, which parts of the plant reproductive system function in the same manner as parts X and Y of the human reproductive system? So right off the top, let's do some identification first. So D over here is the ovary, C is the ovule, B is the anther, and A is the stigma for your plant. Moving over to your male reproductive system, this is actually your testis. And for your female, this will be your ovary. Now I'm going to add a few more just to help you guys revise. So this is actually your womb or the uterus. This would be your fallopian tube. So when they ask you which part does fertilization occurs, actually the fallopian tubes is where your fertilization will occur. Many students tend to have this misconception that fertilization actually occurs in the womb or the uterus. That's wrong, because the fallopian tube is actually where your egg and your sperm will actually meet each other and fuse. This fusion of these two sex cells results in fertilization. So the same thing over here. Do note that fertilization for plants also happens in the ovary. Alright, so a lot of students have this misconception that once your pollen grain lands on your stigma, the plant is considered fertilized. No, this process of the pollen grain landing on your stigma is known as pollination. It is not to be confused with fertilization, because your sex cells for your plants, the female part, is actually located right here. So your your male sex cell is going to have to travel downwards to meet the female sex cells inside the ovary. That's just some recap. So very straightforward. What is X? X is actually your testis. Alright, it's the part that actually holds your male sex cells for your humans, right? That is actually the same thing for part B of your plant reproductive system, whereby the anther contains your pollen grain, which contains your male sex cells. So in this case, we can say that part X is actually B. So then by elimination method, I know that A and D is wrong, so we go ahead and eliminate these two. Then we look at part Y. Part Y is actually our ovary, and as we have already identified over here, D is actually the ovary. So therefore, answer would be number 4. Question number 2. The diagram below shows the stages in the life cycle of a butterfly when fertilization occurs. Which of the boxes A, B, C, or D represents the stage at which is a garden pest? So, in order for it to be a garden pest, we must ask ourselves, which part of the butterfly's life cycle will probably result in the damage of leaves, and that will actually be our caterpillar, right? So unlike your caterpillar, the adult butterfly actually is beneficial to plants because it helps out in pollination. So that's something we need to take note of. So looking at it, let's take a look. Now, it is stated over here that fertilization has occurred here. So we have to think about it in the sense that when fertilization has occurred, what we get after that is an egg, right? So this is the egg stage. And then from the egg stage, it will hatch, and that's where we get our caterpillar. And then you have our C, which is actually your pupa. Sorry, just 1 second. Let me just... Okay, and then after that, you have your D. After your pupa, you have your adult butterfly over here. So it's important to actually do certain annotations like this. This would really help you to get a better understanding of what exactly the question is asking for. So in this case, the answer would be B. Okay, so just let me correct this. Yeah. Okay, moving on. 3, study the cells below. So straight off, this is a cell question. So once again, for cell question, you have to memorize identification of structures together with its function. Which parts of A, B, C, D, E, and E of the cell labeled above show that the cell was taken from the leaf of a bird nest fern? So right off the top, okay, we need to understand what is bird nest fern. So bird nest fern is a non-flowering plant. Okay, it reproduces by spores. Okay, and it's green, able to make food. Okay, so we also know that, okay, so from this, we know that firstly, it has to be a plant cell. So the fact that it is a plant cell, E will be able to tell me that the structure of, which is actually your cell wall, tells me that it's a plant cell, right? Okay, so let's do some labeling first. So this is the cell wall. This is actually your vacuole. This is your nucleus, chloroplast, as well as your cytoplasm. So out of all this, what will tell me that it is a plant cell? The first thing would be the chloroplast, excuse me, and your cell wall. The rest of these items, which I'm going to use yellow to highlight, are actually common structures that are found in both plant and animal cells. So it won't really help me in differentiating between a plant and animal cell. However, I must point out that there are differences between the vacuole of your plant and animal cells. So animal cells, they tend to be small and numerous, whereas for your plant cell, they tend to be central and only one big one. So we have already identified that the chloroplast and cell wall is going to help us confirm that it's actually a bird nest fern. Cell wall, because all plant cells are cell wall. Okay, chloroplast because it's able to make food. So you will need your chlorophyll in your chloroplast. So answer 3. Next, the diagram below shows the cross sections of a fruit and a flower. Which parts of the flower do not develop into parts of fruits after fertilization? Alright, so maybe we should look at the part that first becomes the flesh, right? So the part that actually becomes the flesh, alright, of the fruit is actually B, which is your ovary. Your D is actually becomes the seeds. So when you have multiple seeds, it just means that you've got multiple ovules in an ovary. Alright, I hope that was clear. So in this case, obviously the seeds are inside the fruit, right? So anything that is in this whole structure here, inside the ovary, basically becomes the fruit. So in this case, B and D is definitely the part that will become a fruit, and the answer will be very straightforward in this case. The answer is 2, A and C. Next. Okay, at noon, Susie put a well-watered plant into a black plastic bag. She tied the black plastic bag with a string and placed it in an overfill for 4 hours. So basically, when we read questions, once again, we always want to have a good idea of what questions are they really asking. So this question is related to photosynthesis. So what will confirm my guess would be things like at noon. So noon, I would think that, okay, this has bright sunlight. Light is available, and light is important for photosynthesis. However, they then say that it's put in a black plastic bag. So now the plant is not able to have any light and probably would not be able to undergo photosynthesis. Right? So moving on to the question statement. Which of the following graphs shows the changes in amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the black plastic bag over the 4-hour period? So whenever I always tell my students this, before the start of the paper, always write down 2 equations. Photosynthesis word equation and respiration word equation. This would really help you to answer many questions. So I'm going to exemplify just one time over here as a quick revision. So we know that in photosynthesis, you need water, you need carbon dioxide, okay, in the presence of light energy together with your chlorophyll, which helps to trap it. And then what you would get in return would be your oxygen and glucose, also known as your sugar. So in this case, all right, we know that if photosynthesis occurs, I should get oxygen. But is this the case? No, right? Okay, so because photosynthesis did not occur, we will not get a high amount of oxygen. Now, remember I said that there were 2 equations you're supposed to write. So the second equation that you need to write would actually be respiration. So in respiration, you have your glucose, which is your sugar, together with oxygen. This is broken down to then release energy and carbon dioxide. Now, it is important to recognize that this process of respiration happens in all living things, and plants is also included. Now, for plants, right, it is important to correct this misconception. Students tend to think that in sunlight, plants do not respire. This is absolutely not correct. Why? Because your plant is a living thing. So it will respire 24 hours. So maybe I just put it down here. So all living things respire 24/7. Why? Because to get energy. Right? You will need energy for everything. Even when you're breathing, you are reproducing, anything at all, you will need your energy to do so. So under bright sunlight, what happens is that the rate of oxygen production through photosynthesis is higher than the rate of oxygen intake required for respiration. So when a plant has finished photosynthesis, it will use some of this oxygen for respiration. And then when there's excess, it will give it out. So that is what happens during photosynthesis for plants. But students tend to think that just because the plants are giving out oxygen, it is not respiring. That's not correct. So in our question here, they asked, which of the following graph shows the changes in amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen in a black plastic bag over a 4-hour period? So right off the top, we have to recognize that photosynthesis is not happening, but respiration is happening all the time. So in respiration, oxygen is being taken in. So I have to look for one whereby the oxygen is actually being depleted. Alright, so looking at it, I know that 2 is wrong because 2 is the only one that is straight. The rest, they are all depleting. 1 is also wrong because it is increasing. So right off the top, I will have cancelled out 2 options, leaving me option 3 and 4. Then after that, I also know that in respiration, carbon dioxide is given out. So because carbon dioxide is given out, I should see an increase in carbon dioxide and a decrease in oxygen. Therefore, my answer will be 4. Okay, moving on to question 6. Okay, now, Lenny prepared 3 setups by putting identical amounts of sand, clay, garden soil respective each funnel. She poured 100 ml of water into each funnel. She recorded the amount of water collected in each measuring cylinder after 5 minutes. Which of the following is most likely to be the water level reading for each soil sample? So this I'm going to just go through very quickly because it's not going to be tested. So your answer would be 3. Alright, because you need to understand that of all, your sand does not retain water the most. Okay, so therefore, collection of water will be the most. It just allows it to flow through, followed by your garden soil. And the one that retains the most amount of water will be your clay soil. So because of that, that is the least amount of water being collected. We're skipping 7. Moving on to 8. Algae grow well in the presence of light. So first thing I noticed, algae is a type of plant. Okay, grow well in the presence of light because of photosynthesis. Okay. Continuing, team set up a following experiment to find out how using light bulbs with different colored lights affect how fast algae grow. So this signals to me that it's an experimental question. Okay, I always label my change variable and my measured variable. Now, he noticed that when light from P was used, the algae produced gas bubbles which are collected in a test tube. He recorded the number of bubbles, okay, and then he conducted the same experiment with QRS, and the number of bubbles produced in 1 minute was recorded below. So maybe let me make a small corrections here. So in this case, the measured variable is actually the number of bubbles produced. Okay. Which of the light should he use for a fish tank to prevent the rapid growth of algae? So in this case, there's a few levels to it. So remember, I talked about how the word equation was important for photosynthesis. So if you take a look at here, you first ask yourself, what is this number of bubbles produced? What do they signify? So if you were to look at the word equation, which I've written earlier, you would have known that in photosynthesis, oxygen is being produced. So in this experiment, the bubbles here actually contain oxygen. So what it means is that the higher the amount of oxygen, the higher the amount of photosynthesis is being produced. And is happening. And with higher rate of photosynthesis, you will get a higher rate of glucose production, which essentially translates to growth in plants. So if you want something that is slow growing, then you should choose R, because it actually prevents your algae to grow rapidly. So based on that, the answer should be number 3. Okay, moving on to the next question. John prepared 5 different setups, A, B, C, D, E, to find out how the presence of carbon dioxide affects photosynthesis. Using identical plants in each setup, different conditions of each of the 5 setups were listed below. Which setup should be used to show how presence of carbon dioxide affect photosynthesis? So first things first, once again, we want to know whether or not, what is our change variable. So our change variable, okay, is we're actually looking at whether or not your carbon dioxide is present, and our measured variable is actually rate of photosynthesis. Now, in this question, right, it is actually a fair test question when you think about it. So in fair test questions, there can only be one. I just want to stress again, there can only be one change variable, and the change variable in this case is whether or not your carbon dioxide is present. All right, other than that, everything else needs to be the same. So therefore, if you look at it, the answer should be number 2. Why is that the case? Let's take a look. So B and E. So let me just go ahead and highlight this, B and E. So if you look at this two, everything else is the same. B has water, E has water, oxygen in B, oxygen for E. There's no fertilizer for B, no fertilizer for E. Sunlight for B, sunlight for E. And no fertilizer, no carbon dioxide for B, but carbon dioxide for E. So if you look at it, right, the only one that is different would be your carbon dioxide, and this is the one that we should be looking at. Okay, we are skipping question 10. Okay, moving on. Adrian had to classify 4 animals below. He classified them using the flowchart below. What are the 2 questions in the flowchart A? Questions A and B in the flowchart shown above. Okay, so this is a question on animal cycle. It's basically on cycles, life cycle. Now, so you have to classify the 4 animals, right? So you take a look at these 4 categories, and what you need to realize that to answer this kind of question, you really do need to know the characteristics of each, category of animals. So for example, the bat is a mammal. So you will need to know that, it gives birth to its young alive, it feeds its young milk, and then your cockroach will be an insect, your duck will be a bird, and then your frog will actually be an amphibian. Okay? So basically, based on all these different things, you will need to be able to then know what are the characteristics, so that you know what's common and what's not common between them. Okay? So let's take a look. Now, question A. Okay, the frog has answered no, the rest of her answered yes. So ask yourself this question: out of all this, which is unique to the frog is a no? So do they lay eggs? Well, your frog lay eggs, so that cannot be the question. Okay, do they have wings? Your bat has wings, your cockroach has wings, your birds have wings. So the only one that is not does not have wings is actually your frog. So this is possible. Okay, so 1 we cross out, 2 we keep. Do they lay eggs? We know that this is crossed out, right? Okay, so we move on to question B. So out of these 3, okay, what is a no for bat and a yes for everyone else? So let's take a look at option 2. Do they lay eggs? So your cockroach lay eggs, your bird lay eggs, but your bat do not. So this is actually a plausible answer. But let's go on to check, okay, for the last one. Do they give birth to the young alive? This is actually not correct for the bat. The bat gives birth. Okay, so by answering no to this question, you have been wrong. So this confirms that our answer is actually 2. Moving on, a florist wanted to find out if the stem of a flower takes in water. She placed a white flower in the beaker containing 200 ml of water, okay, with red food coloring dye, as shown. Which of the following should she use as a control? Now, a control basically shows that whatever results that you have gotten is due to the experimental variation that you have made. Okay, so in this case, you're talking about whether or not the stem is the one that takes in water, correct? So in a way, this is like your change variable up to a certain extent. So when you do an experiment, you want to prove that the result is due to a certain factor that you're investigating. And in this case is whether or not the stem is the one that takes in water. So if let's just say in one setup, you already have your stem, right? Then in your control setup, you need to prove that whatever changes, so in this case, your white flower becomes red because the red water was being taken up by the stem, then your stem cannot be there. So in this case, the answer will be 3. So because if you take a look at it, you actually wrap, okay, your plastic wrap around the stem. So this prevents any water coming into contact with your stem. So in a sense, your stem is not there. Okay, so therefore, proving that if the flower turns red, it'll be because your stem has taken in water. So answer would be 3. Moving on, okay, the diagram shows a human digestive system. So once again, for the human digestive system, you will need to learn how to identify the various parts and at the same time, look at what are its function, how is it related. Now, then it goes on to say, Gary, Harry, Irene, Jadine, each made a statement about the digestive system. Okay, then they ask you, which of the following correctly matches each statement with the labeled parts of the digestive system above? So once again, we have to do labeling. So the first up, in this part, this is the gullet. Q will be your stomach. R will be your large intestine. S will be your anus or your rectum. Sorry, in this case, I think it's more of a rectum. And then T will be your small intestines. Okay, so now let's go ahead and then match. Okay, so it states that in this case, solid waste is found here. So your rectum is in charge of storing solid waste. Okay, so in this case, S will be for Gary. Digestion is completed here. That will be your small intestines. So your small intestine has 2 functions. The first function is actually for digestion of food. I think I should just pen this down really quickly. That's complete digestion of food. And the second function would be the absorption of digested food into your bloodstream, okay, so that it can be circulated around your body. So that will be your T. Irene says water is absorbed from undigested food. That is your R, your large intestines. And then last, digestive juices are added here. That would be your... Okay, actually for this part, right, digestive juices are added here. Now, I'm going to have to say that for this particular statement, there are multiple answers. it could be Q, it can also be T. Alright, so both your small intestines and your stomach, they do add digestive juices, but since T has already been used up for this, we are going to go with we're going to go with Q. Okay, because T has been used up. So then we cross check, and the answer would be number 1. Next question 14. The circulatory system carries blood containing gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide through blood vessels to all parts of the body. The following diagram shows blood flow in different parts of the circulatory system. So once again, this has got to do with circulatory system right off the top, because I see the diagram of the circulatory system. Okay, and then they give you a key to tell you what is rich in oxygen and what is rich in carbon dioxide. So as a thumb of a rule, blood that's rich in oxygen will definitely be one that is coming out of your lungs, because gaseous exchange has just happened there, okay, whereby your lungs will actually take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. Okay, so therefore, this is actually rich in oxygen. Okay, and then after it gets resupplied with oxygen, it will then go into your heart, and from there on, your oxygenated blood will then exit the heart and go to all parts of your body. Now, the reason why that is the case is because your body needs to carry out respiration. And if you remember correctly, in respiration, you need oxygen. So therefore, the blood that is entering the body from the heart needs to be rich in oxygen. Once it exits out, okay, it will be poor in oxygen but rich in carbon dioxide, because your body parts will have already carried out respiration, whereby carbon dioxide is given out. Okay, goes back into your heart. Okay, because now it's poor in oxygen, it needs to go back to your lungs to actually be reoxygenated. Okay, so therefore, we've already drawn out the diagram, we just need to match it to the option, and the answer would be 1. Next, 3 similar pots of plants of the same mass, P, Q, and R, are used in the experiment shown below. They are placed in airy and sunny place. Each pot of the plant is watered with 300 ml of water. Which of the setup correctly shows the observation after a day? So basically, if you take a look at this, you need to ask yourself, what is the difference between these 3? Now, if you look at these 3, the plastic bag is really preventing, not light in this case, in the first case, but really altering the concentration of water, right, that is being enclosed in this system. So for example, in P, you realize that any water loss in this case is going to condense onto your plastic bag. So in a way, it doesn't really leave the system completely. And then after that, in Q, any water loss is going to just be lost to the environment. So in a way, water has mass. So when that happens, your plant Q is going to lose mass because it has lost water. Okay, and then after that, your R in this case would have also lost water as mass, because the leaves are the part whereby water loss is the most. Now, the process in which water vapor is being lost through the leaves is called transpiration. Alright, so the stomata are basically tiny openings usually found on the underside of your leaves. So they serve 2 purposes. One is for transpiration. The second one is actually for gaseous exchange. So then they ask you, which of the following setup shows the correct observation? So right off the top, I'm going to say that the answer is actually 1. So like I say, in P, any water vapor that is lost is actually trapped within the bag, and it will condense onto the bag. However, for Q, any water that is lost is just lost to the surrounding. So this will actually have less mass than P. So this is correct. B is actually wrong because technically speaking, they both will have lost the same amount of water, because like I say, water is lost mainly through the leaves. So even though you put this back here, it doesn't really affect much. However, I must say that technically this should go up, and this should go down, simply because the back here actually prevents evaporation. So at least some amount of water would be retained here. Okay? So if you were to compare which one has the most amount of water, I would say that it will be this one, plant P, followed by R, followed by Q. Now, the table below shows freezing and boiling points of substance C, D, E, and F. At which temperature will only two of the substances be at its liquid state? Okay, so to do this, I always draw this temperature line to help myself make sense of things. Okay, so I have freezing here. Your freezing point is also known as your melting. And then I have boiling. So, and then I will label the states. Okay, so anything that is actually before my freezing point is actually a solid. Okay, anything that is after, and of course temperature is moving in this way. Okay, this is temperature. So as temperature increases above freezing or melting point, it will be a liquid. And then after that, when it gains more heat, anything that's after boiling point is actually a gas. So with this, I'm able to actually answer the question. Okay, so the question asked, at which temperature will only two of the above substances be at its liquid state? Okay, so let's take a look at it. At 2 degrees Celsius, we know that 2 degrees Celsius for C, okay, it's below its melting point. So 2 degrees is its freezing point. If it's 15 over here, 2 degrees is somewhere over here. So it's going to be a solid, right? Okay, so looking at that, I know that C, okay, at 2 degrees Celsius is not going to be a liquid. So I'm going to cross this out. Okay, now this one tells me that 0 degrees. So at 0 degrees, because 12 degree, sorry, at 2 degrees, it is actually above its freezing or melting point. So it will become a liquid, and its boiling point is only 100. So yes, I know that this will actually become a liquid. And then at C, I know that, for E, I know at 7, since the freezing point is only at 7, at 2 degrees, it is still a solid, so this is a no. And then at F, 2 degrees is actually below 4. So this tells me that since it's below, 2 is below 4, okay, it will still be a solid, so no. So in this case, straight off the top, I know that, okay, there are 3 that is actually not a liquid state, and only 1 is. So this does not fulfill my 2. So right off the top, I know that answer 1 is wrong. So due to time constraint, I'm just going to go to the correct one. So the correct one is actually 25 degrees. So let's take a look at why is that the case. Now for C, the freezing point is at 15. So at 25, it's somewhere here. So it's actually after its melting or freezing point, so it becomes a liquid. And its boiling point is only at 35. So at 25, I have not reached my boiling point yet. So therefore, yes, it's going to be a liquid. Then after that, I take a look at D. Its freezing point is at 0. The temperature is at 25. So therefore, since 25 degrees is above the freezing or melting point, it is going to be a liquid. Now it will only boil at 100 degrees. So therefore, it has 25 degrees is not above boiling point, so it's going to stay a liquid. So this too is a yes. Now let's take a look at E. Now in E, okay, so what happens is E, the freezing point is at 7. Okay, 2 is actually before the freezing or melting point, so therefore it is still a solid. So answer is no, it cannot be a liquid. And for F, it is above 4 is actually the freezing point is actually 4, which is over here. Okay, 25 degrees is actually above it, so yes, it's going to be a liquid, but wait, because 25 degrees is also above boiling point, it's going to be a gas. So in this case, no, it is also not going to be a liquid. Sorry, can I just re-explain for E again? So for E, as I was saying, because E's freezing point is at 7 degrees, 25 degrees is above 7, which is over here. So therefore, it is a liquid. Okay? And at the same time, because 25 degrees is also above the boiling point, it's going to be a gas. So therefore, E will also not be a liquid at 25 degrees. It is going to be a gas. So in this case, all right, the answer is C and D, which is actually 2 of the substances is going to be at liquid. So answer is 3. So you can try out the rest for yourself. So to do this, right, what you need to do is you need to actually determine at 25 degrees what is the state. So if I'm going to do this for the correct answer, right? So C will actually be a liquid. D would be a liquid. E in this case will be a gas. F will also be a gas because at 25 degrees, it's already higher than the boiling point. So it's beyond its boiling point, it will be a gas. Okay, so you can do this for the remaining to just check your understanding that you know how to do this type of question. Okay, question 17. Mike wanted to find out how well 3 containers of different materials could conduct heat. The containers were equal in volume and contain the same amount of water. They were placed on the heating source as shown in figure 1. After 30 minutes, he observed changes in the water levels of 3 containers as shown in the figure. Okay, so basically right off the top, the change variable would be the 3 different materials. Okay, and then after that, you see that the water level has changed. Now, the first question I will ask myself is, what happened to the water? So water cannot just disappear like that. So the fact that it cannot be seen anymore tells me that it must have undergone evaporation. So because it has undergone evaporation, right? And I know that for evaporation to happen, heat gain must happen. So you think about it, if the heat source is here, okay, and we're talking about, of course, heat needs to be gained to the containers. So basically, the better the container is, the better the conductor of heat the material is, then the faster the heat will actually be conducted to the water, enabling it to evaporate at a faster rate. So right off the top, I already know that C is the best material. Sorry, B is the best material because it has the least amount of water left. So this tells me that it has undergone the highest rate of evaporation due to the largest amount of heat gain. Okay? And A would be the worst. So in this case, the answer would be number 3. Okay, number 18. The diagram below shows a cooking pot. Study the properties of the 4 materials shown below. Okay, which material is suitable for making the body of a cooking pot? So first things first, okay, you want to really be able to show what is basically the purpose, right? So a purpose of a cooking pot tells me that I want to have good it needs to be a good conductor of heat so that heat can be transferred from the heat source to the cooking pan ASAP. Okay, and then this would actually allow my food to be cooked in the shortest amount of time. At the same time, I also do not want my pot to be flexible. This is so that it will not bend when I put in a lot of food in it. So I do not want it to be flexible, and I want it to be a good conductor. So in this case, the one that fulfills this would be answer C. Okay, the diagram below shows 4 beakers containing water at different temperatures. The 4 beakers are placed in the science laboratory at a room temperature of 25 degrees. Which of the beakers will evaporation of water takes place? Alright, so if you actually understand the concept, of evaporation, we know that evaporation happens at any temperature. So because of that, it doesn't matter at what temperature the water is at, as long as it's above melting point and below freezing point. Okay? So in this case, the answer would be at 4. Now I know that I said below boiling point, and then you'll be thinking, oh, but this is at 100 degrees. But when you think about it, the person did not place the beaker on a fire consistently. So what actually happens is that because it's not placed consistently on the fire, eventually the temperature, the minute you leave the heat source, the temperature will start to drop already. So when it starts to drop, evaporation will happen. So of course it's different if you put it under a heat source and you say you leave it under a laboratory, because then it'll be constantly be at 100 degrees, and of course boiling will happen. All right, question 20. Okay, Ben fills a syringe with some water as shown in the diagram below. He pushes the plunger inwards, until he could not push any further. Which of the following correctly describes what will happen to the volume of air and water in the syringe after he pushes the plunger inwards? Now, this is a very, 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 very common question. So right off the top, they're trying to test you the property of various states of matter. So in this case, we need to recall. Now, what are they testing you on? They're testing you on whether or not the matter has a fixed volume. So we know that air has no fixed volume, and hence it is able to be compressed. Okay, whereas your water in this case has a fixed volume because it's liquid and it cannot be compressed. So right off the top, very simple. The answer is 1. The volume of air will have decreased because when you push, you are compressing the air. So when it compresses, the volume actually becomes smaller. But for water, it has a fixed volume. It cannot be compressed and it will remain the same. Moving on to the next question. The diagram below shows a water cycle. Okay, which of the following represents A, B, and C? So for this type of question, right, it's good to run through and then try to justify the various processes or the various elements of the cycle. Okay, so let's start off somewhere that we definitely know. So for me, I always like to start off with somewhere that I'm very confident. Usually that is right before a process or right after. So you can choose either condensation or evaporation. I'm going with evaporation simply because A follows after that. Now we know that in evaporation, all right, it is actually the gain of heat from its surrounding. And then after that, what happens is that liquid water will become water vapor. So right off the top, I know that A in this case is water vapor. It is right after a process. Then your water vapor, okay, will undergo condensation whereby it will lose heat. Okay, after it loses heat, it actually becomes tiny water droplets, right? Or water droplets. Now, there is no process here and it returns back to the river. So in this case, all right, it will have fallen as rain because there's no change in state between these two. This must be rain. So your tiny water droplets over here are actually suspended in the air, also known as your clouds. So with that in mind, we will have already filled in all the blanks and correctly identify as number 2. Whereby A is your water vapor, B are your clouds, and C will be your rain. Question 22. The diagram below shows the path a ball takes from P to R after Tim hits it at P. Okay, which of the following correctly describes energy in the ball? Alright. So in this case, you have to run through each and every single one. A, the ball had no kinetic energy at Q. That's wrong. Okay, so remember it's in a constant motion. So definitely the ball is still moving. Okay, so this is wrong. B, the ball had more kinetic energy at P than at Q. Definitely. Alright, because the kinetic energy, alright, at Q, most of the kinetic energy will have been converted to gravitational potential energy. Okay, so definitely right at the start there is more because KE is being actually changed to GPE. So yes. So from Q to R, the amount of kinetic in the energy, okay, increases while the amount of gravitational potential energy decreases from Q to R. Now, for this is actually true because when you look at it, okay, the height of it as it goes from Q to R is actually decreasing. Alright, and GPE at this point of time is being converted into KE. Alright, so the more GPE that's being converted to KE, so obviously your GPE will actually decrease. At the same time, okay, your GPE is also decreasing because of the height. Alright, so answer would be C. From Q to R, the amount of kinetic energy in the ball decreases while the amount of gravitational potential energy increases. This is definitely wrong. Why? Because if you take a look in terms of height, your height is decreasing, and height is one thing that increases GPE. So in this case, your height is decreasing, so therefore your GPE should also decrease and not increase. So in this case, your answer is B and C. Next, Megan had a toy shown below. The toy consisted of a pull rod and a spring which could be used to shoot a ball out. Okay, when Megan pulled the rod this way, the spring in the toy was compressed and the ball was moving downwards. Which of the following forces causes the ball to move downwards? Okay. So as we all know, anything on Earth, right? You have your your gravitational force acting on it. So when you pull, okay, you lower the spring, your ball will automatically fall down, alright, roll towards this direction due to gravity. Okay, so the answer should be 3. 4. Daisy placed 2 similar iron nails M and N next to a magnet as shown in the diagram. When Daisy picked up a magnet, only iron nail M remained attached to the magnet. Which of the following statement best explains Daisy's observation? Okay, so take a look at this question. Now, first things we have to decide, okay, whether or not, okay, what are the magnetic materials? So we know that they are both magnetic materials because they are both iron nails, alright. But they tell you that only M remains attached. Okay, so we know that these two are not magnets. Okay, so right off the top for A is wrong because we know that only magnets can magnets with like poles facing each other can repel each other. So because the nails, they are not magnets, we know that it cannot repel. A is out. Okay, the magnet lost its magnetism at point X. You know that is not possible. Also, if a magnet has lost its magnetism, the whole magnet, alright, has no magnetism. So we look at C. Iron nail M was attracted to the pole as the magnet attraction of the pole was the strongest. Yes, this is actually true. So at the two ends at the poles, the strength of magnetism for the magnet is actually the strongest, and therefore that's why your iron nail actually remain attached. So the answer should be C only. 25. James had cubes of the same size but made up of different materials. He placed the 2 cubes on 2 identical springs as shown in the diagram. Okay, based on his observation, what can he conclude from the experiment? Okay, so right over here, let's take a look to see what is correct and what is wrong. We will have to run through every single options in order to eliminate them. So the first one, cube A has a larger mass than cube B. This is not correct because if cube A has a larger mass, alright, technically speaking, given that the springs are identical and the size is identical of the 2 cubes, then spring A should, your gravity should exert a stronger force on your cube A, and you will pull it further down. So it should have in fact a more compressed spring than B. So that didn't happen. So only cube B experiences elastic spring force. This is also wrong because if you look at it, your A has also compressed your spring by a good 2 cm. Right? So because it's being compressed, it will experience some form of elastic spring force. 3. Cube A experiences more gravitational force than cube B. In this case, it's not correct again, because remember, gravitational force is affected by your mass. The larger the mass, the larger the amount of gravitational force. But in this case, this did not happen. As you can see, it is actually B that experiences a greater amount of gravitational force as it got compressed more. It's got pulled down more by gravity, compressing your spring more. So this is also wrong. So we're left with the last option. Cube B experiences more elastic spring force than cube cube A. This is actually correct. Why? Because in cube B, the spring actually got compressed more and they are identical. So because of that, we can say that due to the amount of more compression, all right, cube B would actually have more spring force. So the answer is 4. 26. Study the experiment below. Brian used a piece of brick as shown in the diagram. Okay. Now in diagram A, Brian placed a metal cube on the brick and measured the amount of force needed to move both brick and metal cube across a table. Okay. Using a spring balance. He then turned the brick over and repeated the experiment as shown in diagram B. Okay, he repeated the experiment using a heavier cube. His results are shown below. So as you can see over here, the difference between A and B is that your brick is being turned into different orientation. So the first orientation will give you less surface area in contact with the surface, and this one will give you more surface area in contact. This is the main difference. Okay, now which of the following best explains Brian's observation? Okay, now they then show you the results, right, and they say which one best explain. So if you were to take a look at it, okay, in this question, the area of contact with the table does not affect the amount of force needed. Because when you see, okay, when you take a look at it, okay, area of contact, all right, when they are the same, the mass is the same, and the area of contact is different, the force needed is still the same at 50. Okay, this is also similar, okay, for the 1.5 kg cube. All right, so C is correct. Now, you will also notice another thing, and that is the greater the mass of the object, the greater amount of force is needed to move the object. So how do we know that? So at 1.5, if you compare the 1.5, okay, of course you have to actually look at the one with the same area of contact. So I'm just going to look at this and this. All right, you will notice that given that they are the same area of contact, okay, the mass being different, the amount of force needed is actually greater. So D is actually correct. So therefore the answer is C and D. Alright, question 27. During PE lesson, Matthew picked up a ball from the floor and threw it against the wall as shown in the diagram. The ball hit the wall at W and landed at point X and rolled on the floor. So he threw, hit the wall, went down, and it rolled, before finally stopping at Y. What are some effects of forces that can be observed and below? So right off the top, we must remember, okay, what are some of the ability of a force? So a force can change a direction of a moving object, it can stop a moving object, it can speed up a moving object, it can even change the shape. So all this is should be in your brains, okay? You should memorize them. However, the case in this question is that they're asking you which of it is happening at a different part of it. So if you take a look at it, I would say that the answer is all of the above, which is number 4. And I will explain to you why. So as you can see, when you throw the ball, what happens is that, okay, when you first throw the ball, you will need to, it starts off stationary, right? So he picks up from the ball and he threw. So imagine it holding in the air is so called stationary, and then when you throw it, you start the movement. As it hits, okay, the wall, okay, you would actually change the direction. Okay, you will change the direction, and then it went downwards. And not only that, when it moves downwards, okay, it starts to, instead of moving down, it starts to move horizontally, and it starts to slow down before finally stopping. So there are various forces in actions here. You have friction that is moving in this direction, okay, that slows down and stops the ball eventually. Okay, you have gravity, okay, that basically pulls it down. Okay, so there are many forces, okay, that's happening. The important thing is to recognize how each of these forces affected the ball and in what way for this question. All right, question 28, last question. Okay, Jerry tested the circuit card using the setup as shown below. The circuit card consists of metal pins at each of the points A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Some of the metal pins are connected by wires behind the card. Okay, now with circuit diagram cards, right, the usual one like this, right, the whole idea is you do not know how are these wires conducted. This is something that you don't know. And the question is going to ask you how is the wire connected at the back, and that is what you need to find out. That is the whole gist of the question. So what you would see are these pins. So you have to figure out how is the wire connected at the back, such that when I connect my bulbs, it will actually light up according to your table. Okay, so it goes, he connected the two ends of the setup to two different pins on the circuit card. The results are shown in the table below. From the result shown, which of the following is not a possible arrangement of the wires behind the circuit card? So in this case, the three must be correct with one that is wrong. Okay, so I'm going to show you one that is correct and then one that is wrong, so that you're able to know what to do in exams. So to make things simple, I'm just going to start off with number 1. So remember, okay, you have essentially a light bulb. Okay, so you're going to connect this light bulb. Okay, so they say that if you connect A and D, so A and D, all right, the light bulb did not light up. Is this true? Yes. Why? Because if we were to look, there is a gap over here. The circuit is not complete. So this is correct. And then you can redo for A and G, which is the next one, right? A and G. A, and then the next one is G. So once again, the circuit is complete in this case. So if you were to run through the circuit, it is complete and it will light up. Okay, and then you will run through the whole entire series of this. Okay, so we're just going to very quickly run through to show you. So one end must connect to B and the other end must connect to F. So when you take a look at it, it says it didn't light up. Trace, once again, yes, because there are gaps, it will not light up. Okay, and then the next one, you have C and E. So one end goes to C, the other end goes to E. Okay, it will light up because it's a complete circuit. So this is correct. So 1 is actually not the answer because it will light up. So then you move on to the next one and then you try again. Okay, so the first one is A and D. So A and D. So straight away, I realized that this is already wrong. Okay, why? Because it is a complete circuit, right? So because of that, okay, it should light up with this circuit, and therefore the answer is actually 2. Okay, so this is not a possible one because it did not tally with my table. So usually they will ask for which of the one that is possible, but in this case they ask for not possible. All right, so with that, we've come to the end of this paper. Thank you.